But that's when you had your first vestibular migraine, right?
Yeah.
So obviously your main priority was the UTIs, which is kind of settled now. But it seems like, because even speaking to you today, you've mentioned it a few times, that your migraine seems to be the bigger issue right now.
Honestly, if I could go back to a time when I only had to deal with chronic UTI, I would go back in a heartbeat. Like, I wish that I never moaned. Like, it is a horrible life-altering condition, chronic UTI, but it is in nowhere near as disabling. Like, vestibular migraine is entirely disabling. Like, it is awful, because I was still me with chronic UTI, and my mind still worked the same, my eyes worked the same, my body worked the same. I just had physical pain. I feel so out of control of my body with vestibular migraine.
If you explain to people what your experience of it is, like what are the symptoms that you experience when it
Do you know
happens?
what's really scary is I'm seeing so many people post in the bladder group, the chronic UTI group, saying that I'm really dizzy all the time, I have these weird spells. I'm seeing it all the time. And I say this with my neurologist, we laugh about it, is I'm constantly diagnosing people with migraine. I'm not saying it to them, but I'm like, oh God, you've got migraine. But you can't keep preaching all the time. But now I know about the different subtypes of migraine, abdominal migraine. I think I mentioned that to you, and you posted about cyclical vomiting.
Yep.
Yeah, because I was talking to my neurologist about that. Hemiplegic migraine, vestibular migraine. There's all these different subtypes that nobody knows anything about that don't come with head pain as their main symptom. And I see how many people are probably dealing with it and have no idea. And I'm like, that sounds like vestibular migraine. Like, they're like, I feel weird. I feel like, and this is how I felt. I had the initial spinning vertigo, rotational vertigo at the beginning. Then that kind of settled, but I just didn't feel right. I felt weird. Like, do you drink alcohol?
I don't drink, no.
So, and I always found this really hard when I was trying to explain to doctors that have never drunk alcohol, because this was my only thing that I could compare it to. When you go on a night out to a club and you're really drunk, and you only realise how drunk you are when you get into the bathroom and you look in the mirror and you're like, oh, that's how I felt all the time. Like, I'd be walking around my house like, I'm here, but it's not me. And I'd look at myself in the mirror, and it was like the most intense derealisation, is that the word? I felt like it was like Alice in Wonderland, weird. Everything's kind of moving, kind of wiggly. For me, everything is tilted to the left now, which is weird, but my brain somehow thinks everything's tilting to the left. So that was initially how it started, really intense visual symptoms, full body weakness. I felt like I was on the verge of passing out constantly. Like when you're just about to pass out, is it syncope?
Syncope, yeah.
Yeah, that, but just on loop constantly, and nothing, no position changes it. Like, unlike PoTS where it's more positional, with vestibular migraine, it's whether you could be flat laying in bed and the bed's still moving and tilting, and you're still like, I'm going to pass out, and it's just continuous. That's how I felt for the first 6 or so months. And then, bam, head pain. Like I had an axe in my head, suddenly out of nowhere. And that's when the doctors that I kept going to started to say, actually, this is sounding a bit migrainey. And then I just happened to have the is it VNG or V?
Yeah. So going back to that,
the testing on the inner ear.
Yeah. So I say that you mean the IAM? Was it MRI you had, or was it?
No, I had the full inner ear testing at a hearing specialist place, didn't I? And they literally like spun me on a chair, blacked out my eyes, put air in my ears. They were testing my actual vestibular function in the ear, and it come back all fine. So
really?
They concluded that I had no gentamicin poisoning, because that's why I was sent with.
Yeah, for that. Yeah.
They were like, this patient's had so much gentamicin. Now she's got vertigo. She's obviously had too much gentamicin. Can you determine the level of damage to her inner ear? And to everyone's surprise, there was no damage. And that's when my ENT was like, your dizziness and your vertigo is coming centrally, it's coming from the brain. So he then re-referred me to neurology. And in that time frame, coincidentally, when the word migraine started to be thrown around, I'm someone that's had classic migraine my whole life, basically, like episodic, normal migraine, starts with a flicker, headache an hour later, gone the next day. I remember saying, oh, no, this is not migraine. I've not got a headache. And they laughed. They were like, it's a different type. And I was like, no, it's not. Like, I was like, I'm telling you, I know what migraine is. And they're like, no, you don't. This is a whole different kettle of fish. And I started to have those appointments, and the seed was planted. And then my symptoms started to evolve. Then I got the little flicker of aura that became permanent. I've got that permanently now still. Then I started to get light sensitivity, hearing, like sound sensitivity. All the other classic migraine symptoms started to creep in, but it started initially with just vertigo.
And you're still living with that to this day, right?
So my vestibular migraine started on the 16th of July, 2021. So this is what's so, and I normally get really, really upset when I say this, so I'm going to try not to cry now. I never had a gap. So I went through everything with my bladder to get better after all them years, and I didn't have any time to enjoy it because I got dizzy before. So like it was so cruel that I finally got an answer to one thing, and then the other thing was already there.
I suppose one thing people don't realise with you is that, I said at the beginning, is that from the outside, you genuinely look like a high-flying, person in your career.
It's such a smoke and mirrors situation with social media, how I've made my life look, because it's nothing like that. Like my dad's sitting in the room here now because I can't drive here. Because the room to me now is going like this, you're tilting. So I just wish that I'd had a couple of years to enjoy my life and do the things that a 30-year-old woman wants to do. And now I can't even hoover my house. I can't wash my hair. I have to have help. I have to have help with everything because I can't do anything because I'm so weak.
I think, and how does all this, because firstly, thank you for being so vulnerable. I think it speaks a lot, and I think people can really see the emotion coming through there.
It's
and
just
I agree.
It's been one thing after another.
And I agree. I think that, of course, I agree with this. I think a lot of people listening will find it hard not to agree. Is that the timing seems very uncanny? How you've literally the moment you're getting the treatment for one that has worked fantastic for one condition seems to have, for some reason, spurred this other debilitating condition.
I joke and I say I wish I could have my brain fulgurated, but unfortunately, there's no cure for vestibular migraine. Like it is what it is, and I don't know if this is how long's a piece of string. Like, am I ever going to get an answer for this? Did years and years of antibiotics detriment my microbiome to a point where it's affected my body like this? I might not have had C. diff, I'm lucky, but has it, the gut-brain relationship, have I altered my microbiome and now I'm paying for it in other ways? I wanted to have a fecal transplant at one point, so I'm like, maybe I just need to repopulate the good bacteria. Like, why has this happened to me?
It's really interesting. Like, I haven't released the episode yet, but I had a really good specialist on a couple of weeks ago. I'll send you his links. His name's Deepak Ravindran. He's a rheumatologist, but he's an amazing rheumatologist. And he was saying about something called the microglia, which is in your brain. And there's two types. One type is fantastic. It helps you function. But the other type is when it just makes you feel horrible. It makes you feel tired, fatigued, dizzy, all these things. And there's a big link between the microglia. So they basically detect any bad things in your body. And there's a big link between them and the gut. So an example he gave was if you have lots of junk food, this can be picked up on the microglia and that can turn them into the bad type.
Right.
So there's a massive link between the gut and the brain. I'm not saying that's the cause for yours, but I think
I just think, how can you go through that many years? I mean, I'm looking at this now. How many years was it? 2015 to 21. 6 years of high dose antibiotics, combos as well for some of them years, like two at a time, like high dose 6 years. How has that not impacted my body negatively? Do you know what I mean? Like I probably am. Like, don't get me wrong. I will have a genetic predisposition for migraine. I have to have that physically. I had normal migraine before. But now for it to be this subtype that is so disabling, that it's like a switch with vestibular migraine. You turn it on and you can't turn it off. I'm not episodic. It started that day and it has never stopped. I've never had a day of no symptoms. But also, interestingly, I read a book about vestibular migraine from a American neurologist called Shin Bear, I think his name is. He's like one of the top vestibular migraine doctors in the world. And he mentions one condition in that book that is linked to vestibular migraine that he believes makes it more likely that you could get vestibular migraine chronically. And what do you think that condition is? Interstitial cystitis.
He said, yeah.
And he said, because in his book, there's a whole section on it, because patients that live with IC have an altered brain state, because it's like that, how I'm trying, the physical thing I'm doing is me trying to describe it, I guess. He's like, they have crap sleep, they never relax. Their body is stressed constantly because of that bladder pain. I didn't sleep for 6 years.
No,
So my brain is like
so
exhausted.
did you know, in the early, say the first 21, 22 years of your life, your body, so you're born with loads of nerve or neuronal connections you don't need. So in the first sort of 22 years, your body's thinking, oh, what should I keep? What should I get rid of? So we know that if you've gone through really bad experiences, like if a child was ever abused, neglected, or went through even the parents got divorced, or anything, even people that had lots of sports, or if you're unduly stressed, that almost sensitizes your nervous system. So that, and these are the people that when, for example, later on in life, when they get an infection on their stomach, they get IBS, or if they go through another stressful period, they get pain everywhere and they get fibromyalgia. So there's definitely something, and that's why I think it's important when you have these chronic conditions, it's always important to go back to the first sort of 21, 22 years in detail to find out what could have happened that may have put you at a risk of having, not for everyone, but what could have put you at a risk to having these conditions. And I think with you, it seems like the stress of this seems to have impacted it massively.
I think the stress of living with IC, years and years of no sleep, affects the brain, 100%.
Yeah, of course it does, yeah.
And something that I've never publicly mentioned is that I had a clinical breakdown a few years before vestibular migraine started, and I don't think my brain has ever recovered from that. I'm a shaken person since having a breakdown, and I was diagnosed with depression at that point as well. So I think it's off the back. I think that there's a lot of puzzle pieces for me personally as a patient, but the IC is the starting block. It's changed my life fundamentally. Like I don't think that I would have vestibular migraine now if I didn't have IC. I think my life would be different.
Yeah,
I mean, it snowballs.
What, I mean, do you want to talk about the breakdown or not? I mean, we don't have to. I know it might trigger things off, but
no, it's way too complicated to talk about that now. But I think that part of that breakdown was only part. There's a lot of factors to that breakdown, but I think part of it is dealing with chronic illness as a young person and being exhausted. That definitely factored into me having a breakdown. I think mentally you get to your limit. So I don't think any of those things help. I feel like my nervous system has never fully recovered from that breakdown. I had the IV gentamicin triggered the first episode. I did return to some sort of baseline after that. If you've noticed, that was 2020, and then I didn't become chronic vestibular migraine until a year later. I got back to baseline and felt normal. Then I had the COVID vaccine and woke up the next day with another vestibular migraine. That's the one that never ended. So that's a whole other discussion.
So I mean, we know now, I can say, I know a lot of people don't want to say this about the vaccine, but we know now it can trigger, in particular, autoimmune conditions. And look, I'm not saying yours is autoimmune, but there's lots of research going out there, and there may well be some kind of autoimmune thing underpinning all this, potentially.
Well, there's a gene, apparently, I keep reading about. There's a gene that links all of these conditions together, and my brother's been diagnosed with a random type of arthritis, hasn't he? And that falls into that gene as well, so basically it's your fault.
Scarlett's dad's here. Very, very nice.
I'm not pointing any fingers, but
he drove you here, and he's sat there nicely and taking this.
I say this to my mum all the time, like, this is your fault, and I'm ginger. What? No one else is ginger. Why am I ginger as well? Like, have I not had it hard enough?
No, but honestly, I mean, it's an interesting point. Like, what? Obviously, you speak a lot about your family, your mum and your dad, and you're very supportive in this. But how has it kind of affected your? Obviously, we've talked about a lot about professional and your personal life. Sorry, not your personal life. We're talking about your professional and your own life. But how do you feel like it's impacted all those around you? Because I think another thing people don't think about in chronic illness is it can affect a lot of people in your vicinity. Now, I'm not saying this to make you feel bad. In fact, I'm saying this to make it, this is a good thing, because I think having that support network, that's a good one, makes a massive difference. I
think I'm very fortunate and lucky that I have got help around me, and like, my dad's here supporting me today. He drove me here. Everyone helps me. They know I need it. Like, I don't have a choice, but I do often think I'm so lucky that I've got friends and family around me to help me, because what if I didn't? I know there are so many other people in this country that don't have a support system. They also can't educate themselves like I have about my conditions. I'm lucky, I'm quite academic. Not everyone is able to go away and research how intensely you need to be able to understand and advocate for yourself. Not everyone can do that. And I'm very lucky that I'm in a financial position that I can spend one day making my symptoms really bad, working hard at a photo shoot, and then I can lay in bed for 3 months selling the photos. Not everyone can do that. I can't work, like I'm registered as disabled. Like, my position is rare, and I don't understand how other people are coping that aren't in this fortunate position that I'm in, because I know that there is no support.
Is there anything else in your... Because it's interesting, because what... yeah, I mean, I agree. I think one of the biggest things about chronic illness we know now is having a good support network. But is there anything else you can think of in your background, in your childhood or your early adolescence years or your early 20s? Because it's interesting for me, because I've been looking into this a lot recently, and I think you'd be a perfect person to ask this to, because a lot of the time there is some kind of... the hot word at the moment is trauma, but I don't mean a massive amount of trauma like you're abusing or anything like that. But I mean, was there anything...
I think it's a massive part. That's going back to the breakdown I had.
Was it?
Not going to talk about that.
Okay, that's fair enough. Of course we don't have to. But
I think that affects your body as well.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, because I think, obviously we're not talking about it now, but I think it's important for people to realise that the reason sometimes when you go to a doctor, you have to make sure that all these things are asked about, right? Because it's all important. And
the problem is you're great because you're asking all these questions and you're looking at the bigger picture. My problem is as a patient that has a 10-minute appointment with
I agree.
I have 10 different appointments a week with 10 different doctors. They haven't got time to ask these questions. They only care about their condition. No one is sitting like you are now and trying to piece the whole puzzle together. Like there's something seriously wrong here that probably could be linked. No one's doing that. I don't think that anyone has that sort of care. You've got to have that care for yourself to try and link it all together.
Yeah, which you've got. I mean, we'll touch on your file in a second, but yeah, it's important. I think so, because I think almost always actually, because I now do very little NHS work because of the time thing, but always with these things, there's always tends to be, with you, there's lots of triggering factors, but there always tends to be one or two main key things. That could be lifestyle, could be work, could be personal, whatever it was. So it's important to remember that. And I think in your case, it seems to have triggered a lot off. And the timing, which you got upset about, I think is perfectly reasonable, because about getting upset about it because you've got better from one, got onto another one, had the vaccine that everyone's told to get, it made it even worse that you've got on now. But what are you seeing right now? Because I think it's important for people to understand that the fact when you say it doesn't go away, can you describe kind of what even today when you're walking, you're like, I can see a little dot on your face kind of thing. Like,
yeah, it's funny because I don't say much, but like following you in here and you walked up the stairs, I was thinking, is there not a lift? Like everything is so hard, but you just don't think about these things until it happens to you. Like looking at you now, like I said, this room is slanted. I'm feeling really good today, but I've still got symptoms. Like I'm not able to drive a long distance even on a good day because symptoms could start whenever they want. I've had random episodes recently where the side of my face goes numb, then my hand goes numb, and I feel like I'm having a stroke. I'm having a sleep study tonight in Cambridge, which is where I'm headed after this, because I have seizure-like symptoms in the night. And someone's saying to me, "Oh, you got migraine? It's just a little headache." Like, no, I have full body disability at times, not all the time. But I can't control these symptoms, especially the visual ones. Like, it's one thing being in pain with bladder pain because I could lay in my bed and read a book. Well, when my migraine's bad, I can't read. Like, when I've emailed to sort this podcast out of you, I'm like, sorry, I can't email because I can't read today. Like, it's so disabling in a way that you can't imagine until it happens to you. It's the weirdest thing, vestibular migraine. It's like you've been spiked and you're outside your own body looking in. It's really odd. I've struggled for so many years initially to explain it to my neurologist, and then I got referred to another neurologist on the NHS, and they're working together now. And she's got vestibular migraine, this neurologist, and every time I try and mention a symptom to her, start describing it, and she's like, I know exactly what you mean. And that's so refreshing because she's like, yeah, I used to have that. And it's like, she goes, no, you don't need to say anymore. I know exactly what you mean, because there are no words to describe how weird it is and how mental it feels. It's not right. It's like sometimes I feel like my fingers are in a plug socket and I've just got too much electricity in my body. Like it's just the neurologist said it's a software issue, not a hardware issue, and that's why it's so hard to fix.
And again, I think this is just, I mean, you've described it again amazingly well, and I think it's just again testament to you and your, I guess, character and being resilient, because your job in particular at the radio station is quite, you work for a very well-known radio station, right? And there's a lot, I'm guessing it's quite well lit. There's, you're going to have these symptoms all the time. But you're still doing the work, right? You're still good at it. So
I've fooled even you because I don't record from that studio. I record from my bed in my pajamas. Yeah. So.
But you make it work though. That's my point.
Yeah,
like you still, you've, a lot of people, most people at this age would give up, right? But you've managed even that. I think that's even more amazing that you do that, because you're thinking, I can't.
Well, I think it's important to have a purpose with chronic illness. Otherwise, it consumes you. It becomes your whole identity, and then you're lost. Like, I would still want to have a purpose. I love radio. I'm passionate about it, and I'm really lucky that since COVID, my bosses at radio have realised that actually people can record from home, because we had to during COVID. And instead of going back into the studio, they know my situation and they're like, you can record from home. I make the effort, I don't have to, but I make the effort to go once every 3 or 4 months to the studio with a suitcase full of clothes. I take all my promo pictures in one day, because then I feel so poorly afterwards. But it's one day. That's better than doing it twice a week.
Absolutely. I think that's amazing.
But people don't know that. And people are like, do you know what? It mustn't be that bad for you, because I've seen you're here. On Instagram, you've done this shoot, that shoot. I'm posting pictures this week that were taken 3 years ago.
I think that's why I say keeping it young, because I think, again, going back to the beginning, no one would look at you think you'd be the furthest thing from a chronic illness, let alone sort of 1, 2.
I hate that, because I'm like, am I deceiving people? I'm perfectly honest if you ask me about it, but then at the same time, I'm aware that my income comes from looking glamorous online and having this exciting radio show. So, like, it is a bit of a facade, but I want to be honest when I can be, so this information is also available. Like, I want to advocate for people as well. I want to be a voice for people, because I do have quite a big reach, and I think that's really important. It would be wrong of me to do nothing and lie about my illnesses.
Look, I think there's two ways. Firstly, I think there's two ways people can look at it. One side, people might be jealous, right? Thinking, okay, look, why is Scarlett doing so well? Despite having a chronic illness. But actually, I think the majority of the people would be looking at you thinking, hey, look, this what can be done. Because it's not like you're hiding away. You're on here. You're on social media, talk about it a lot. So I think people are looking at you thinking, okay, look, Scarlett has got a chronic illness, but she's still doing all these things. So it is possible, despite having lots of things going on. So actually, I think it's definitely it's a positive thing, doing what you're doing.
I think that is important to say. Like, obviously what I do is quite random, but people with illness should have a purpose.
100%.
Even if it's a hobby, it doesn't have to make money, just something that you can disconnect from your illness for even an hour a week or whatever, just something that gets you outside of that negative place kind of thing. I can't do the things I'd love to do before. I've got a degree in equine science. I'm a horse rider. That's what I do. I can't ride anymore. I'm devastated. That's awful. I can't do half of the fun things that I want to do physically, but you've got to find other things that you can do and then kind of throw yourself into those.
No, I agree.
Compromises.
I think having a purpose, I think that stands for life. I think in life you need a purpose, right? But so that we've covered obviously quite a lot on the UTIs, the vestibular migraines, but one thing you mentioned, also MCAS a bit, but the one thing you mentioned also was another massive thing since the vaccines is PoTS, right? So
that's my latest addition to the.
So what's going on with that? What happened with that? When did that all start?
So I actually think that I have had PoTS since I was a teenager. I had glandular fever as a teenager. That's probably another piece of my puzzle. And I don't think I ever really fully recovered. I always felt, quote, poorly since then and weak. And I was a bit of, oh, Mum, I don't want to ride my bike. I don't feel well. Like, I was just quite lethargic for a long time after it. And as a model, which is what I started off doing initially after uni or during uni, modelling's not as glamorous as it looks. You spend a lot of your time on tubes, in casting queues, standing up at shoots all day, outfit changing 30 times. Like, it's a lot. By the end, I would feel faint constantly. My whole life has been, even like at concerts, days out, walking around the shops, like, everyone must feel really faint. I feel really faint. I thought everybody felt faint all the time. I used to get on the train to London and watch construction workers choose to stand up rather than sit. And I used to think, why would you choose to stand? Like, that's really weird. You feel like you're going to faint? No. Apparently everyone doesn't feel like that. I felt like that my whole life.
So when did you get diagnosed? Have you been diagnosed formally?
Yeah. So this is another thing. I'm going to film this. I'm going to send it to him. I fucking hate my GP. Like, I've got major beef with him because I'm like, you caused my chronic UTI because you dismiss me. He dismisses me about everything. And I was like, I think I've got PoTS. Don't be silly. And then literally had to go back with the cardiology letter, like, I have got PoTS. And he's like, very rare. I'm like, told me chronic UTI is very rare as well. I'm vestibular migraine. Yeah, you're very rare. No, I'm not. So many people have got these problems.
I think it sounds like, I think since you always sound like you might have had it a lot earlier, but I think especially for some reason, since the pandemic, the vaccines, the number of people, where there's more awareness, people learning about PoTS and thinking, I've got this, has gone through the roof. But
I think
how did it come about?
It's pushing people over the line, and that's what I think happened with me. I think I've had symptoms of PoTS since being an early teen, but I might not have been clinically diagnosed. So the numbers that you need to reach for a diagnosis, I reckon I probably would never have made them. I was never sent for testing, but I managed. I didn't feel as poorly with it as I feel now, and my heart rate wasn't insane. I just couldn't tolerate long periods of standing. Another thing was when I was modelling, I used to do a lot of e-commerce modelling, which is like you're a mannequin on a white background in the same position all day, just different outfits. Every single photographer that I'd worked with over the years would say by the late afternoon, your legs are really red. They weren't red this morning. They're a completely different colour. As the lighting changed, and they'd start faffing. It wasn't. It was blood pooling. But I didn't know what it was. And I used to get out the shower and be like, why are my legs and feet bright red with these big spots all over them? And I remember sending my friend who's a nurse a picture of my legs. She was like, oh, we only see that in patients with heart problems. She's like, palliative nurse. She was like, nah, you're all right. Like, you won't have anything like that. It's just really random. I've always had PoTS.
So how did you get diagnosed then? What was the?
I think that contact with COVID is what pushed me from being low level, manageable, maybe not diagnosable, like I'm just on the line, to suddenly panting, sitting in a chair. I wouldn't be able to have this conversation with you if I wasn't on beta blockers. I'd be like literally panting. I remember sitting at home last year, and I kept going back to my GP saying, I don't feel right, I feel really weird. And the thing is, when you've got vestibular migraine, the symptoms are so broad. Any symptom you mention, any doctor will go, vestibular migraine, it's because you've got vestibular migraine. And it was only when I started panting and my heart rate was nuts, I went back to the doctor and was like, no, this isn't right. That heart rate is nothing to do with vestibular migraine. I'm panting. And she was like, I just saw a different GP for once, and she was like, no, you need a cardiology referral now. She was like, why has the other GP never referred you? And I'm like, he never refers me for anything. He always just says you're too young. So she referred me, and then I was diagnosed. And actually, I think that the tilt test is a little bit redundant, and I'm seeing that a lot online. Lots of patients feel that the tilt test isn't that great, and it's a bit medieval in some respects. I actually was diagnosed via a treadmill test. So for me, as soon as I start movement, my blood pressure gets lower and lower, and my heart rate gets higher and higher and higher, basically. So I did a treadmill test, and instantly they were like, no questions, you've 100% got PoTS.
So that quick diagnosis, that was it?
I did a Holter monitor as well for a few days. But then based on all the other symptoms I have, the blood pooling and, you know, what I told the cardiologist that had been happening for years, she was like, it sounds like you've been managing it without realising for a really long time, and now you can't manage it anymore, probably because I come into contact with COVID. So that pushed me over the line.
I suppose also you had other things going on, you know, with the UTI stuff, so it might have always been there, but it's just never been.
I just thought it was normal. I used to have a pass at my senior school because I used to faint in the queue at lunch if I didn't get to the food quick enough, because the queue was sometimes 20 minutes long. I kept fainting in the queue for lunch at school, so they gave me a special pass, and my GP just used to go, it's because she's anemic, she's a bit iron deficient. No, it's not. Like, come on. Like, my blood tests aren't that bad. You're just dismissive. I needed a referral years ago. I just never got it. And then I was panting like a dog, basically. And then they were like, okay. I did do a tilt test, and then did the treadmill test, but that was the telling sign for me. As soon as I start walking, blood pressure just, heart rate up. So,
but I mean, look, so I think one thing I want to touch on before I let you go, I know we said an hour, it's been an hour and 40 now, but like, is that big file you got there, all right?
Yes.
And I know, and we talked about it earlier, and I know some doctors might not like me saying this, but I think it may be harder than the NHS, but I think when patients bring a file like that, it's a good thing. I know a lot of doctors don't like it because it takes up time, or they may think you may ask unnecessary questions. But I think the problem with the way the system is so fragmented, right? So I can't see a scan you had done in a hospital this part of the country or this time. Whereas a lot of the time we can't progress a consultation until we have that information.
Exactly. And tonight when I go to this NHS sleep study, they are going to ask questions about my migraine medication, which is prescribed privately.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So I need this information with me. Like, they can't access that information.
And I think I know a lot of people with chronic illness. I did a post recently about saying about a timeline for fibromyalgia, just, you know, when exactly the symptoms started, what you were doing. But I think, and a lot of time, even just doing that takes a lot of energy. But I think one thing and you probably agree with this, is I urge all people with chronic illnesses who feel like they're not being taken seriously, is just to keep a record of everything and ask for your results, ask for your scan reports, ask for your blood results.
Yeah. I say this to people with their first UTI. I'm like, what bacteria was it? And they go, I don't know. Ask, because if that UTI is back in a week, it's going to be the same bacteria. You need to know now what the resistance is and what you should be demanding from your GP, basically. But people don't know. Unless you're poorly, you don't know these things.
Yeah, no. That's why I think I want to bring that up, because I think that's a really important thing. And when you brought it out, I was like, okay, that's great. You've done a lot of your research, you have all your tests there, so it's it's fantastic. But Scarlett, what do you? So firstly, thank you so much for being so vulnerable today and being so open about your conditions. I know we talked a lot about things that a lot of people may not agree with, or that is a bit taboo, in particular. But I think there's a conversation I think will resonate with so many people, and give them hope as well, actually, and also a lot of researching things to look into. But going forward, what do you wish? How do you wish chronic illness or people with chronic illness were treated differently? How do you feel like we could help them better? Because I want to know from you, what can I do to make your care better? Because I think a lot of the time, it can be anything. What do you think, if you had to choose 2 points that could help your care, speaking for all of chronic illness patients,
from a GP's perspective, are you saying?
Or doctor, any doctor. I don't see about GP. I know you don't like GP.
I've had a really bad experience with my GP, and I hope he sees this kind of thing, and I hope he sees the stories I do in the press, because I've not proved him wrong once. I've proved him wrong 3 times. If a patient is asking for your help, they genuinely need it. Like, I hate being treated like a drug seeker. Because what am I seeking? Nitrofurantoin. What high am I getting off that? Like, this isn't fun. We're seeking because we're in pain. I think it's a problem when the illness is invisible, especially when you look normal. You don't get taken very seriously. I think that, how can I even put this into words? There's so much I want to say. I think the most frustrating thing that I wish doctors understood is that when you tell us our results are negative, that is not good news for us. In terms of, obviously, for sinister tests, it is good news. But for things like UTI, or things for stuff like PoTS and all these other really life-altering illnesses that aren't terminal, getting a negative result is not good news for a chronically ill patient. Can I record this, actually?
Yeah, you can do what you want.
This would be a nice TikTok.
Yeah.
I think what I wish that doctors knew is that getting negative results for a non-terminal or non-sinister test is not good news for a chronically ill patient, because I might come to you with really extreme UTI symptoms and you tell me, it's fine, you haven't got a UTI, your dipstick was negative, your culture was negative. Hooray. That hasn't helped me. I'm still in pain. So you're going to send me on my merry way, and I'm in agony because my test was negative. I've got no help. There's no progression. If the test is negative, why are urologists and GPs not thinking, well, there is something causing this pain here, so what can I do next? How can I help this patient? Let's look under that umbrella and think, what one of these things could it be? Because they're not offering alternative. They say your test is negative, goodbye.
Oh, yeah.
That's not an answer.
Yeah, no, and
it's devastating.
It happens a lot with blood tests as well. Like, I don't know if you're tired all the time, blood is normal, go away kind of thing.
Yeah,
and I get
it doesn't
that.
help.
It doesn't help, and I get that from your point of view. And I think one way around, in particular in the national service, is by self-advocating. And I'm not, because now I work a lot privately. It's very different because I've got time. But one way, that's why I think self-advocating, asking for your results is vital, because you will pick up on stuff that the doctor might potentially miss. So I know it's important to get that across there. But I think what you've said again resonates with so many. We talked way longer than we could even talk a lot longer, but I just want to cut it short there.
I've got to go to hospital.
Yeah, and obviously, with your migraines, well, I don't want to trigger anything up potentially. So, but look, honestly, I really appreciate you coming down today, and
thank you.
I'm interested to see how you progress your illness. So, we'll definitely stay in touch.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been really good. Thank you.